Well, what this legislation does is trying to change what I call independent contractor to be called employee. And the reason I'm doing this legislation, for nobody is a surprise, and this is not the first time I put this legislation either. One of the things is all these independent contractors, they work, but they don't get benefits. And I understand the company don't see them as an employee. They see them as an independent who do contract with them. But at the same time, those people don't get paid fair. They don't get no benefits. They don't get sick days. They would not be able to get worker compensation. They would not be able to get any kind of benefits that an employee regular. And my thing is, or we do something now, or we're going to pay later for this. Why? Because see, these people don't have no benefits. When they get older or they get sick, who going to pay for them? And this company making millions of dollars on them. And they can put something together and put some benefits for these workers. They can put like a plan for them to get health insurance. They can put a plan for them to have a 401k. They can do more than what they do. And they said they're not an employee, but without them, they would not get no money. They need them to be able for that company to continue making all the millions of dollars that they're making on this employee. Then I think it's time for the state who have to take the responsibility. And like I said, if we don't do nothing now, we all going to pay for the consequence in the future. Because when these people get sick and they go to the hospital, who going to pay for that? Us. Who going to pay when these people don't have they cannot apply for Social Security? When they have to get a regular or go to housing, we're going to pay sooner or later see we don't do something on this, making this company responsible for those people because they are the employee one way or another, and they can help them. They can pay them better wages. They can pay them some benefits, and that's the purpose of this legislation. I can answer any question you may have.
Are there any questions for Senator Quesada? Senator Picard.
Hello, Senator, and it may be for legal counsel as well. I'm just trying to clarify something. A teacher retires, goes back and works the 90 days just for wages, would this affect them?
I don't think so.
Because, you're saying they would be eligible for additional benefits and stuff. So if a person retires, I work for the school department, I retire, and I go back, and I work for substitute wages, which is just dollars. Would this, if we pass this in the way it's written, would that affect that or not?
I don't think that would affect that because this is more for the gig economic.
No,
and we're talking about more Uber, Lyft, and those kind of company who really do this independent contractors.
No, I understand what you're going to, I'm just,
Yeah.
sometimes we pass things that get a little bit more.
No, I
more
understand,
time.
Senator.
So, just asking.
No, this would not affect that. There's a specific law about that separately, and you're still getting paid wages in a W-2 sense. When you are going back to work even though you're retired. It would not affect that.
Okay.
Senator Lombardo had his hand up. I didn't see it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give us an example of a few of those companies making millions of dollars over
Uber,
not paying independent contractors?
Uber, Lyft,
Those are
and
two-
so many other companies similar to them.
Which other, Uber and Lyft, can you give me other manufacturers or companies that are making millions of dollars?
I'm more specific talking about this company, Grab, the one with the food, so many other companies who use an independent contractor, but I'm more specific to Uber and Lyft.
Okay. So they become employees of that company?
Yes,
Okay. So they offer health care?
yes.
They can only offer it. Most young people are not taking health care. They rather see the money in their pay. They don't want health care. So the cost of a Lyft to go from Providence to Westerly will double the cost of the passenger because now they are no longer an independent contractor.
I understand that, but at the same time, they will have the choice. If they decide they don't want to have health insurance, that would be up to them. My thing is, see, we don't do something now, Senator. So, like I said at the beginning of my presentation, sooner or later, the state going to be responsible. Many of Uber and many of Lyft, they confuse because they do tax. And they think because they pay the taxes that they are paying to the Social Security. And that's not true. People are getting confused. When you do your tax return is a tax return. That's how much you may and how much you have to pay to the state and to the federal money. But Social Security is a completely different thing, and people get very confused with that. And I said that because I have people who came to me and said, no, I do my taxes every year. I'm paying money to the Social Security. I said, no, that's not true. You're not paying a penny to the Social Security. See, you don't do it in different, you can do it, but you have to find accountable to do it for you, and every 3 months you can put money into that. As many people, they prefer, like you said, to have the money in the pocket, and they're not thinking about the future. They're not thinking they're going to get older. They can get sick. They can get a car accident. They're not going to be able to work. And when they're not able to work, they're not going to be able to pay housing, food, and at the end, who's going to pay for it? The state, sooner or later, has to become responsible for those people.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Senator.
So Uber and Lyft, let's just go back to those, because you mentioned those two.
Well, I mentioned them, but I saw the companies.
Okay, so let's just stay right on track with the Uber and Lyft. So Uber and Lyft would have to supply the vehicles now also to every Uber and Lyft driver. Instead of now they're using their own vehicles to drive. They are going to have to get a fleet of vehicles because you can't use an employee vehicle if you're working for a company.
Well, I have to
So
say
there's-
something to you. I used to work for the city.
So there's a problem for that. Then I got another question. As far as Social Security, if you do not put a penny into Social Security, you do not receive Social Security. So the federal government and the state is not paying Social Security because they decided not to. And there are a lot of people, there are other states other than Rhode Island that have the option of not paying Social Security, or where I should say TDI. TDI, they have the option of not paying TDI, but to go out and get a private company to cover their TDI. So it's up to the individual. Why are we putting this burden on companies to babysit?
And I'm not saying the company need to babysitter. I'm saying the company need to be responsible for them. And going back to Social Security, I'm not saying that they have to pay Social Security. I'm giving you an example that sometimes people confuse filing taxes with thinking that they're paying to the Social Security at the same time. That's what I said. I made it as an example. I'm not saying anything about Social Security. And another thing, I worked for the city of Providence for 22 years, and we used to use our own car to do inspections. Then it's possible.
I also work for the town of Johnston, and I have a town car to use. They don't want me using my vehicle because they would be liable if I got in an accident while driving my own vehicle.
But the city of Providence didn't believe that at the beginning. I said, we just have car 2 years ago. And I worked for the city of Providence for 22 years. And before that, you use your own car and you pay your own insurance. The city didn't pay for that.
Do they now?
They do now.
Okay.
Thank you. Senator Lombardo.
Thank you. Senator Casado, I have a bigger concern. Have we brought to the table the workers' compensation court or anybody involved in the omnibus legislation involving workers' comp?
Yes.
Have we brought them to the table on this?
No.
Okay. The only reason why I suggest that, and just merely a suggestion, is that we're attempting to, by this legislation, and I understand and I applaud exactly what you're trying to get at. I understand that. But by doing so, the means that you're utilizing seems to be redacting two chapters of what is rather some significant workers' comp jurisprudence on this very issue. There are a million cases on this issue, and there are different tables of indicia that you look at to determine what creates an independent contractor and what doesn't. And my only concern with this bill is that certainly we're attempting to rewrite a history of law and an area where it's become a little bit more predictable than it used to be, because there's something you can look to. And that would be my only suggestion in this case.
No, thank you for that
Thank you.
suggestion, and I will look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Senator.
Any other questions for Senator Casada? Thank you for your testimony, Senator.
Thank you.
Chris, you're up first in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Christopher Carlozzi. As I've stated earlier, I'm the state director for the National Federation of Independent Business in Rhode Island. We represent hundreds of small independent business owners, including many self-employed individuals, as well as the businesses that contract with them. Freelancers like computer support, landscapers, painters, photographers, electricians, mechanics. On behalf of those self-employed individuals and those that utilize their services, we urge that you oppose Senate Bill number 430, altering the definition of employee. Aside from, as I said earlier, NFIB's Rhode Island director, I also serve as Massachusetts. And this bill operates very similarly to how Massachusetts independent contractor law works, which means a complicated test where it makes it virtually impossible to be considered self-employed. The history of the Massachusetts law starts in 2004, when the state altered the definition of independent contractor, creating a far stricter definition. I don't represent some of the rideshare companies or anyone that the senator was talking about before. I represent the smaller businesses, those who seek to be self-employed, those who want to be self-employed. And when attempting to make the Massachusetts law more understandable, it led to more confusion for those people. Now, at one point, the Massachusetts legislature wrote a law that, along with the Attorney General's advisory opinion, interpreting the existing law made it more confusing for the employer-self-employed relationship. It led to some people being employees according to some state agencies while remaining independent contractors in other state agencies, and then federal authorities, it was almost separate from that. So even when they seek professional advice from lawyers or accountants, there's still some confusion regarding financial penalties regarding this classification of workers. In addition, out-of-state employers would prefer to hire independent contractors from states other than Massachusetts, where we talk to business owners, people like book editors, where they were having trouble finding jobs in Massachusetts. Nobody would contract with them after the Massachusetts law passed. I remember a business owner calling our office talking about that. Right now in Massachusetts, the only thing keeping a lot of self-employed individuals from being considered employees is selective enforcement of the law. And that's something Rhode Island shouldn't want to emulate. In fact, according to a 2013 study a little while back, a group called New Jobs for Massachusetts studied their independent contractor law and estimated it was to suppress over 43,000 jobs from being created within a decade of that law being enacted. Rhode Island should want to encourage job growth, including jobs for those seeking to be self-employed. It's futile to ignore the growing trend of self-employment. Greater numbers of self-employed individuals prefer to select the work schedule that best fits their needs and have moved away from more traditional scenarios. Rhode Island should ensure this booming sector of the economy is not hindered by a restrictive new definition of employee. So on behalf of small businesses, including self-employed individuals and those that contract with them, we urge you to reject Senate Bill number 430. I would entertain any questions.
Are there any questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Very much, appreciate it.
Lynette Menard is next in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here this time on behalf of the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, and we are in opposition to the passage of this bill. I missed some of the testimony by the sponsor, so I'm not sure if she went through and explained the ABC test, which is what she's adopting. In order to be an independent contractor, you would have to meet all three of the pieces of the test. One is free from control, and that's part of the IRS factors now, and I get that. The second part is that the person performs work outside the usual course of business. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. That's a really hard one for the business community to meet. And then third is the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade that involved independent contractors. I've sat before you a few years and talked about this issue from a personal, it's the best way I can describe it. I am an independent contractor. I do pay my quarterly taxes, and in those quarterly taxes, just to be really clear, is Social Security tax. And I have to pay not only what I would pay as an employee, but I have to pay the employer side. So I'm paying double. So I want to clear that one up. Secondly, I am here on behalf of Northern Rhode Island Chamber, so I'm an independent contractor there. I'm here for Rhode Island Association of Realtors. I'm an independent contractor with Terry Martesian for that client. So I'm sitting here in this room right now representing two people. If I get up from this table and slip and fall, God help me again, as an independent contractor, I'm responsible for myself. I have my own health insurance. I have my own accidental insurance. If this passes, because it's not outside the normal course of activity for a Chamber of Commerce or for the Association of Realtors to lobby, I have to be an employee. So if I am an employee of both parties and I get up and fall again, my question is, which entity do I go through for my workers' comp? If one lays me off, do I get unemployment insurance for one while I'm working for another? It really does complicate the landscape. So I just want to put that before you, and the rest I think I'll go along with Chris and what he said, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Are there any questions for Lynette?
I'll try not to fall, Chairman.
I just wanted to make sure there were no obstacles in front of you there. Alan Krinsky from the Economic Progress Institute in favor. Good afternoon, Alan.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Alan Krinsky. I'm the Director of Research and Fiscal Policy at the Economic Progress Institute, and I'm here to testify in strong support of Senator Quezada's Bill 430. And it's really, I think, it's simply saying, let's look at what people do, and if they're doing what workers do, what employees typically do for a company, then we should treat them like employees, and that's what this ABC test does. And you take the example we've heard about Uber and Lyft. It's one thing I think we think of independent contractors where, you own a restaurant, say, and you hire someone to construct something. You're hiring an independent contractor to put an addition to your restaurant. They're clearly not your employee, but the whole business model of something like Uber or Lyft or DoorDash, these companies, that's what they're doing. That's their very business, and the people that are working for them are functioning like employees would in other businesses. And so if they're going to function like employees, we should treat them like that. And I think the key issue is not the Social Security, it's really the unemployment insurance and worker protections. So these companies are not paying into the unemployment insurance fund, and these workers cannot claim unemployment insurance or other kinds of worker protections like workers' compensation. And the state is losing a significant amount of revenue, much of that in the unemployment insurance system. From that. So I think it's really about protecting workers. Something that I want to bring to your attention that I did not include in my written testimony on this, so I wasn't quite aware of it, is a report, which I'd be happy to share with you, from the UMass Amherst Labor Center on worker misclassification and wage theft in Rhode Island from February 2022. And they reviewed over 3,000 unemployment insurance audits from DLT between 2016 and 2021. And, although certainly the vast majority of employers are honest and paying into the system what they should, they said they conclude that 9.3% of Rhode Island employers are illegally misclassifying workers as independent, and this is a substantial increase from a similar review in 2008. And they said that an estimated $185.3 million in workers' wages and salaries were unreported to the DLT in 2019. There's much more in here, but I want to note that. And I just conclude by noting that this is not sort of some new, wild, crazy idea. You see from my written testimony, there's a map on the second or back page. Rhode Island is the only state, not only New England, in the entire Northeast, that hasn't incorporated some version or some elements of the ABC tests into statute, and I think it's time that we do so. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Committee have any questions? No, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Ryan Holt. In opposition. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen.
Ryan Holt on behalf of the Rhode Island Business Coalition in opposition to Senate Bill 430. Chris and Lynette put it very, very well, so I just have maybe just a couple of things to add. Number one, for those unfamiliar with the coalition, it is a group of businesses, large, medium, and small, throughout the state, in every one of your districts, many chambers of commerce, many trade associations, including the energy marketers, the realtors, bankers, beverage association, builders, hospitality, manufacturers, home care, and just so many more. They're opposed to this legislation because of the problematic three-pronged test that it creates. As mentioned, the test that it creates would basically make being an independent contractor in this state illegal under most every single circumstance imaginable right now, and that's problematic for the reasons stated before. And I would note, we're not just talking about these large multi-state companies here. We're talking about locals. We're talking about everyday Main Street organizations like, your local realtor's office, like your local landscaping company, even your local law office. So this legislation is incredibly problematic, and we respectfully ask this committee oppose it, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ryan? Thank you for your testimony. We have written testimony in opposition from Christine Kennedy from DoorDash. Next up is Bob Goldberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Once again, this afternoon, I'm here on behalf of Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce in opposition to this bill. I would begin, and I will be very brief, by saying this is a tremendously complex area of the law. This bill in no way addresses Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the federal protection that's geared at. They have a different test than this. The IRS has a different test than this. The common law has a different test than this. In many states, a smattering of versions of that. So I would suggest that this as written makes Rhode Island an outlier. While there are no criminal penalties in this, if you look at the existing statutes on misclassification, there's already a misdemeanor embedded into that, and this would automatically put a lot of working people in Rhode Island on the wrong side of the law. I've spent a lot of time researching this area of the law this session. The state of Rhode Island has over 2,000 independent contractors in its employ. I got that right off the internet with their names and what they're making. You can all go leave and look that up. It's very interesting. But for example, and this bill does not address emergency situations or temporary situations. The example I'm going to give you is every winter, every fall, the Department of Transportation advertises for emergency snowplow independent contractors. All of a sudden, that would be all wiped out just by this law. And Senator Picard, I would say I've reached a different conclusion to your question about retired teachers than your legal counsel. To answer that fairly, there are measures, I think, there are measures in here that may repeal as a subsequent legislative act some of the earlier measures in the law that the private counsel was talking about. I'm not saying she's wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying it's a very complicated situation. And you're criminalizing and making it much more difficult to do business in the state of Rhode Island, passing this definition, which if you look at even the wording, I've been practicing law 45 years now, and if you go to page 8 of 18, I can't tell you what line 15 means. It's unintelligible. Maybe I'm in the slow group, and I probably am, but I can't tell you what it means. This would wreak havoc in the employment world in Rhode Island, and for those reasons, the Chamber opposes this legislation as written.
Are there any questions? No? Thank you for your testimony. Last is Will Farrell from Uber. No testimony. He's in opposition. Mr. Martesian, a senior member, please. I guess age has brought you some privilege up here.
My trouble is I might need some help getting up. Seat's a little. Terry Martesian, again, just for the record, I agree with what's been said with regard to this bill. This bill has been around in various forms for a long time. It was a big issue maybe 10, 12 years ago, and it did not pass. And it should not pass now because I'm an independent contractor, and I want to remain an independent contractor. And I have a good working relationship with the people that hire me. And I do not want to see this bill pass because it's going to hurt a lot of people. It's going to change the whole dynamics in this state with regard to employer, employee, try and figure it out. So for those reasons and many more that have been said before, the Rhode Island Mortgage Bankers Association, the Energy Marketeers Association of Rhode Island, and the Rhode Island Lumber and Building Material Dealers Association all strongly oppose this legislation.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Thank you, Terry. All right, that concludes the testimony on Senator Quesada's bill, Senate Bill 430. What's your pleasure?
Motion to hold.
Motion to hold by Senator Lombardo, seconded by Senator Sosnowski. Any discussion? Being none, roll call, please. Yes.
Senator Lombardo?
Yes.
Senator Cruz? Yes. Senator Lombardo?
Yes.
Senator Ray?
Yes.
Senator Picard? Yes. Senator Sosnowski?
Yes.
Okay, next,